Hello and welcome to the Nutritank podcast, where we interview leading experts within the field of food systems, nutrition, and lifestyle medicine. Our aim is to empower you, the next generation of healthcare professionals and change makers. We believe that the valuable knowledge and experience of our guests will inspire you to act and join the movement in creating a healthier population. Welcome everyone, my name is Dr Iain Broadley, Nutritank co-founder. We hope you thoroughly enjoyed our first episode of the Nutritank podcast, where my co-host Luke interviewed myself and my Nutritank co-founder Dr Ali Jaffe. It's an interesting episode for sure, and one that will provide context to the story of Nutritank and our mission to improve nutrition and lifestyle medicine education within healthcare and our communities. So do go check it out after this episode. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Nutritank podcast. Today's guest is one of my lifestyle medicine mentors, Professor Trevor Thompson. His passion for medical education is grounded in his love for robust, holistic medical care, which he practices as a GP in a multicultural inner-city surgery. In 2015, he was appointed as head of teaching for primary care at Bristol Medical School, and in 2019, as Professor of Primary Care Education. Professor Thompson has an Advanced HE National Teaching Fellowship 2015 and was voted Teacher of the Year by Bristol students 2019, 2020 and in 2022. At Bristol Medical School, over 400 GP teachers deliver 20% of the clinical teaching. Professor Thompson is the originator of Cobb Connect, a 21st century approach to teaching the consultation. In this, Bristol Medical School champions the importance of self-care activation as a part of every doctor-patient interaction. When not at work, he is at play with boats, bikes, books, and bettering the yield of a large allotment. Professor Trevor Thompson, welcome and thank you for joining us on the Nutritank podcast.
It's my pleasure, Iain. I'm glad to be here.
Before we kick off, I think it's worth telling our audience a little bit how we're connected and our backstory. So between 2015 and 2021, either myself or Nutritank co-founder Ali Jaffe were medical students at Bristol Medical School. And we were either being directly taught or were part of one of Professor Thompson's educational projects at any one point, I'm sure. And so as we created Nutritank in 2017, it would be, it's very clear that Professor Thompson was a mentor and an inspiration behind a lot of our work. For example, Culinary Medicine UK, who I'm sure a lot of the audience will know about, was first piloted, the medical student component of it was first piloted at Bristol Medical School. And myself and Ali were part of that first cohort and also were involved in helping to bring it to Bristol. So let's start. So before going into our discussion on your work, let's tell our audience a bit about you. So where were you born? Where did you grow up? And tell us a bit about your passions outside of work.
Oh my goodness, I'm not sure I ever grew up. That's part of the problem.
Very good.
I was born in Belfast, and I went to school there, and then I went, like quite a lot of people did in my generation. They left Belfast to go to university, as we would say, across the water. And I've really lived and worked in England ever since. I did have 4 years in Glasgow during my training. Passions outside medicine in? Well, gosh, I love food, as you can imagine. I love cooking. I love shopping for food. It's quite nice where I live. You know, it's not just supermarkets. And I grow food, so I've got quite a big allotment. I think maybe you've visited it once or twice, and it's having a good year, despite a slow start. And I guess, you know, the other big thing in my life is sailing. I do sort of very niche type of sailing called we call it adventure sailing. It's really sort of sailing the Atlantic coasts of Ireland and Scotland and the south of England and even Brittany in a small boat. Uh, a dinghy, a Wayfarer dinghy. Yeah, it's really good fun. I've just come back, in fact, from 4 days sailing in Donegal in the northwest of
Oh,
Ireland.
beautiful.
That was really
Really?
Mm. It's a great antidote to
Yes.
medicine, I find, as is growing things.
What are you growing at the moment?
What am I growing? Well, you name the vegetable, and I'll tell you if I'm growing it.
What's in season at the moment?
Well, it's still early-ish. For instance, the tomatoes aren't really ripe yet. But just we call potatoes come in different types depending on when they're ready, and the so-called earlies. I'm actually slightly late to get them out of the ground yesterday, and they're looking absolutely delicious. Chard is a no-brainer. People, it just doesn't seem to get hit by any pests. There's rainbow chard and Swiss chard, and it's delicious. You can fry it. The young leaves work in salads. We try to be self-sufficient in lettuce. We share our love with lettuce, with slugs, snails, and birds. So there's a bit of competition for this plant. And yeah, what else? I mean, I don't know whether non-gardeners might not notice this, but it was actually a pretty cold, wet. Even into May, it wasn't very warm. But for some reason, rhubarb has had a great year. So we've eaten a lot of rhubarb. I read somewhere that it's not healthy to eat too much, but I haven't seen the ill effects yet.
Oh, well, that was an amazing picture. I can kind of just see all the colors. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's jump in. So, we, you're Professor of Primary Care at Bristol Medical School. A lot of the work that we've shared has been about self-care, activation, or lifestyle medicine. For our audience, what definition do you like to use for this field or this therapeutic tool? What's the definition you like to use?
It's a good question, Ian, because um, as you've probably already noticed, it's very easy to get caught up in language. The word sort of holism and holistic, I mean, that's a particularly dangerous one, because it's so easily people attribute it to their practices, and those things can be very diverse. And some of those things are things that we probably aren't really part of medicine. With what we're talking about now, lifestyle medicine is a helpful name for something. You used a word a moment ago, which is this concept of activation, and I think that's probably a slightly higher level concept. And I think that what we're trying to do with the curriculum here is we're trying to evolve it from basically what you might call an interventionalist model. It's things you do to people, particularly in modern medicine, pharmaceutical interventions. And we're saying, okay, so there are some damn smart drugs out there, and we're very glad to have them. And what's really important in health is a sense of agency, that you can do something about your health, and you can have some degree of involvement in your health care as well.
So that's interesting. But what term do you think we should be using? Is it we should be using lifestyle medicine as a field, or do you think that that has some connotations that are people, connotations that we shouldn't be using? Does that make sense?
I think lifestyle medicine's
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
fine. I mean, if people have problems with it, should probably just get over them,
yeah.
because everything you do need
Yeah.
names,
Yes, you
don't
do.
you? And like I think as long as you kind of hold these things loosely and don't have too rigid an idea of them, um, I mean, one of the sort of chief critiques of lifestyle medicine, and as a name, is a very reasonable critique, and that is the notion that lifestyle sort of has a feeling of choice about it. People choose their lifestyle, and therefore the argument goes, well, choose a healthy lifestyle for God's sake, and you'd only have to sit around medicine for a few years to realize that it just isn't like that. People don't really have choices in the same way as kind of you imagine, like choosing a wallpaper. It's not like that. People's choices are constrained by their family structures, their cultural background, what's available in the shops near them. Uh, and the area I work in. I mean, it has improved actually, Ian, but the famous corner shop, which is quite a big shop. Like I used to take students around there and say, "Look, guys, there's actually nothing in this shop that I can eat."
Yeah,
Like, every single damn thing, apart from a rather unhappy-looking, what do you call those French apples? Golden delicious apples. That was about it. Like everything's packaged and everything's highly processed, and that's not so good for. It's not the best way to eat, in my view. So really, the word lifestyle, y- you've got to try to not come at it from a sort of middle or perhaps upper middle class view of things, but to take a bit more of a whole community approach to the concept.
brilliant. Well, it's really good you've touched upon community, because we'll come to that in some later questions at the end of our conversation. But just for the audience who may not know what we're talking about in terms of lifestyle medicine, what is that? How do we define that? What is that therapeutic um, tool?
And I might have to dial back a bit and say that, like in my daily practice, I'm probably more interested in what this concept of activation, right? Sorry to go, because the lifestyle medicine, as I see it, best practiced, is really an empowerment tool. I think that our job is in our toolbox is are tools to help, and it sounds cliched, sorry, but help people help themselves. I mean, that's how I see it. And I found that you can do this in any consultation. I mean any consultation. It's always possible to put that spin on it. And there's many ways of doing it. One of the most simple ways that any half decent health practitioner will, I hope, already be doing is to give patients information about their conditions. And these days, in the world of general practice, I don't think the hospital people have got this together yet. But this wonderful new opportunity to send people things by text, the Accurex system, for me, that's been a real game changer as a GP, because I regularly 10 times a day, perhaps, text people information about their condition. And, there are trusted sources these days. That probably wasn't always the case. So would that be lifestyle medicine? Probably not. I mean, the big hit, the big areas in lifestyle medicine, surely, I mean, everyone knows this, but they're the eat, physical activity, emotional self-care, sleep, better sleep, and yeah, I mean, I don't know whether relational things count as lifestyle, but things. I like to feel myself as a family doctor. I'm often talking about relationships. The psychosexual sphere is underlooked and can be very, very important to people. Like people are on medications that alter their sex drive and so on, and need to you need to be ready to ask about those things and not inhibited about that.
Absolutely. Um, we've sort of, I quite like it that we kind of jumped straight into talking about the therapeutic and the treatment of self care activation. But let's just take it back to the sort of root cause. So, what is the biggest health issue in your view that's facing the UK at the moment? Um, and it is a big question, but things have actually maybe changed in the last 10 years. But what do you think?
Well, well, I'm going to be quite annoying and say that I think that health is generally not that much to do with healthcare. I'm afraid
Expand
not.
on that.
Like health is, I mean, health is really comes from things like not being knocked about too much when you're a kid, um, having a decent place to live, probably for most people having some form of employment or having a um, you know, a settled and important role within a family, say, and yeah, not being the victim of stupid things, discriminations that we know exist that affect people. Um, Sanitation. I mean, it's a long list of things that are really not much to do with healthcare. Despite, unfortunately, in the human condition, despite our best efforts and the best efforts of society, people still get sick and they still have accidents. And so we do need healthcare. And, life, as the Yon Buddha reminded us, life is suffering, like we are, we are prone to disease. We're obviously aging as well. So probably the biggest threat to health is actually aging. Is that possible? No, death.
Absolutely. No,
In other, what I'm trying to say, it's an inevitable
yes.
thing that even in the most healthy cultures, accidents definitely happen, and so do diseases and infectious diseases. But I think the thing that sort of, I don't know, annoys me is that there's unnecessary suffering, right? There's unnecessary disease that could be avoided, and can be avoided. And, as a sort of a sentinel example of that has got to be type 2 diabetes. It's super prevalent. It's not caused by, but associated with overweight. And I believe certainly in the early phases, it is not only is it preventable, but it is treatable and potentially curable by, this so-called lifestyle medicine. And I've got half a dozen patients who have normalized their HbA1c through lifestyle. And so, like, given is it billions we spend on diabetic medication and associated medications from the complications of diabetes, like hypertension or comorbidity, shall we say, like, this should be a priority. If these sorts of interventions work, and I think the evidence is becoming very strong that they do, then, this should be a priority for UK NHS. And I think it is definitely improving. As a GP, I get, the latest thing for diabetics in our area is looking very much like a nutrition and exercise-based approach.
Are you a healthcare professional looking to elevate your knowledge of nutrition and lifestyle medicine? Nutritank CIC wants to empower you to have the communication skills and knowledge of lifestyle medicine to improve your patients' health through free CME accredited webinars hosted every Monday evening. Learn from leading experts in the field and gain access to cutting-edge research and best practice. Here's what you gain through our webinars. Enhanced knowledge of nutrition and lifestyle medicine and applying it in clinical practice. Continued medical education credits to maintain your license. And free access to a library of previously recorded high-quality educational webinars. Take action now. Register for upcoming webinars or become a member at nutritank.com. The links will be provided in the show notes. Invest in your clinical practice and patients' well-being and fuel their health with Nutritank CIC.
There's a bit of doom and gloom around the rise in persisting conditions, but there's also a lot of light on the horizon, I think, and I may say just something else about lifestyle medicine is it is fun to practice. And don't underestimate the importance of fun in the practice of medicine. I mean, might I say I'm actually serious about fun? When I say fun, I mean just a sense of just engagement with the patient, having an interesting conversation. It was always called the 17th lowest income ward in England. I actually don't think it is anymore, but it's not a rich place by any means. And like many of my patients, they're working in security, they're working in taxis, they're bringing up largish families, or they have significant social problems, and all the rest, right? And it's very multicultural. It's a very interesting community to work for. But one thing they are not are people that academic skeptic types would consider like into lifestyle and like in military medicine and all this sort of stuff. Like they're just not. Um, so uh, and it seems to me that lifestyle approaches not only work well in this community, they seem to work better than anywhere
Wow.
else.
Okay. That's I guess that's contrary to what you would think. Obviously due to agency, but so you touched upon the examples. You said many examples of patients who've had their diabetes put into remission. You've known about. Could you talk about an example of that and what the process was? Um, yeah.
I've got, yeah, I've got one fresh in my mind. S- Oftentimes, think the actual real story of how things happen isn't anything like what it should be. Like it's so the patient presents with headache, in fact, and I trying to figure out what's going on. I run a bunch of tests. It shows that he is actually diabetic, type 2 diabetic. It's a bit of a surprise because this particular patient wasn't, even, I think he had BMI was 27 or something. And, like, I think he's a barber. That's right. So he's sort of on his feet, like not a heavy dude, but he looks pretty fit, and he's quite shocked by this. And I didn't think he had migraine headache, but there are people who approach migraine headache with, there is a school of people that use dietary approaches in that. But also I was looking at his diabetes, so I basically gave him a quick explanation of the low carb diet. And Dr. David Unwin, who if you haven't podcasted him yet, you'll have to, because he is the leading person on primary care approaches to reverse type 2 diabetes. And he has got some infographics, which I keep on my computer, and I send it off to him. Now, I'm just going to say that this guy is common amongst people in my community who do not understand what a carbohydrate is, in the sense carbohydrates become sugars, right? This is not normal. This is not widely understood. But these people I say these people, my patients, I perceive them on the whole to be pretty smart, right? So I explained to him about carbohydrates and their relation to sugar and the possible connection to his headache. Unlike some patients, I might say, he basically just did exactly what I asked him to do in terms of the diet. He just stopped, he stopped his rice and he stopped his potatoes and he stopped, I think, this particular community eat a lot of pasta, and he stopped this. He basically understood the instructions, right? And it was very, very nice because, first of all, his headaches went away and headache free. And also, then after about 3 months, his HbA1c, it wasn't very high. I think it was like 42 or 3. It was back down. It wasn't quite out of the pre-diabetic range, but I think it was something like 43. So, like, he was quite delighted, and he didn't seem to mind the diet one little bit. Um, when I say mind it, I think he enjoyed. It hadn't been a hobby for him. And I've got about, as I said earlier, I've got about. It's not a big series. Like David Unwin is next level, right? He's got hundreds of patients who he's done this with, but I have maybe just about 6 or 7. Can I just draw a general observation about
Yeah.
lifestyle medicine, which is that very much it is the patient doing something, right? Now, the general problem in humanity is that we don't have the ability to do the things that we know are good for us. Well, we do, but we fall by we have difficulty doing it. And so these sorts of cases where somebody just, that's why I joked earlier, he did what I told him. I didn't really sound like that, but he just did what was needed. And it is quite hard sometimes. And so with a lot of my patients, applying a sort of idea set, which you know about, Iain, which is the motivational interviewing frame. And I find that extremely helpful. And I use that in lots of situations which aren't to do with um, food or nutrition, which is where the context in which I initially wanted to learn about it. I mean, it really applies to almost anything where somebody needs to take an action. And the essence of the method is getting the patients to help them connect to their motivation for doing a thing. That's more important in my experience than the actual technicalities of the things you've got to make, because people tend to lack motivation more than they lack information.
So I guess it's a good time now to kind of discuss what that framework is. Or if you wanted to share that, it'd be great to hear what strategy you use. Or we can actually discuss it as part of, because you've brought it into the teaching at Bristol. Is that
Yes, I mean, every medical student at Bristol is taught motivational interviewing, and I have to pay homage here to Professor Stephen Rolnick and his associates. Stephen actually works across the Bristol Channel from us here in Bristol, which I only found out long after I'd started to practice it, and I've done some trainings with him. So what we do is based on his thing, but we've just, and with his blessing, I think we've just spun it a bit, because motivational interviewing was actually mainly designed for people coming to clinics with major behavioral issues, usually around drugs and alcohol. And if we've done anything, it's to try and make it a bit more applicable to sort of normal, regular GP consults or hospital consults. So yeah, so we've developed a system. In fact, I remember now, your infographic you created is still
is
going
it?
strong.
So
Yeah, it's still.
awesome. So the name of it, the Lifey, is it? We're still using that.
Yeah. So a life is short for a lifestyle conversation. So the idea is that within a medical consultation, we call it in Bristol, we try to call them Clarking consultations rather than just Clarkings. Clarking's got a slightly bureaucratic vibe to me. And these are consultations, and they are meaningful to the patients who get consulted by medical students, much more so when that medical student is really engaged, which I believe they very often are. But shall I say a little bit more about how?
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk about the structure
so
of the Lifey, the lifestyle consultation.
sure. So if you've done a regular, sorry if you're not a medic, this won't necessarily have these boxes in your head, but medics are taught a very specific way of, it's still often called taking a history. I would prefer if we talked about receiving a history rather than taking it. I think it's a better verb. Um, and the purpose of the history and the examination is to gather a well-rounded impression of what's going on. And well-roundedness is as important in acute settings as in more chronic setting, but you vary how much background you might want to get depending on the context, obviously. So what we're talking about now is not suited to so-called, very minor illness consultations and so on. But one of the boxes is the social history. Now, I did a little survey of clinical teaching fellows. These are sort of junior doctors who teach medical students. And they were kind enough to admit that the social histories, even this was about 3 years ago, still amounted to, does the patient smoke and how much alcohol do they consume? Is that still possibly true, Iain, or have things moved on a long way?
So it's still on the whole, that is, well, yeah, smoking, alcohol, recreational drugs, and social how situation at home. And then for those who've been taught the lifey, it's a little bit more, as I do. But yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we wrote we give a lecture called "From Pigeons to Patients," and the reason that it's called pigeons is because there are autoimmune diseases which affect people who keep pigeons and other birds, and also infectious diseases you can get off of birds. Famously, recently, bird flu. But or the risk, the worry about bird flu. Um, but so that was when I was a medical student. You were taught to ask the patient, did they keep pigeons? And this is like this is such a random thing of all the different things you could ask. Don't worry about the fact that they're totally immobile and only eat fast food. But do you keep pigeons, right? So the social history is. If you ask me the structure of the lifestyle conversation, I'd say it has mm, two very broad bits to it. One is finding out about the patient's current lifestyle, which we can unpack. And the second bit, which is the honors level, is the doing something about it. And that is what in Bristol training, and you mentioned earlier, we talk about this as the activating phase. First, you cannot activate someone without knowing where they are in their health self-care journey. And so the skill here is to find out about the person in a way that doesn't put them immediately on the retreat. Because patients are quite susceptible, we are all quite susceptible to feeling judged. And particularly if we've got something wrong with us that is potentially due to a behavior. If we take a patient admitted with an acute exacerbation of COPD, still smoking, say, right? So if you start banging in on the smoking, there's definitely a risk that, or let's say it's going to be, you've got work to do to get the patient feeling that you're truly got their back and truly on side. And the key sort of energy there is that of non-judgmentalism and what I sometimes describe as unshockability. A good doctor or nurse or practitioner learns to just never look surprised by whatever it is that the patient brings to the table. So we would, and one of the lovely things in the lifestyle conversation, which actually was an idea from a medical student. Actually, she said, "Why don't you start your lifestyle conversation asking the patient what they do to look after their general health?" And Iain, I have to tell you, if you got to keep going with this one because it actually works. Because there's a lot of things embedded in that question. First of all, there's the assumption that people do look after their health. And I've had several patients look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, look after your health. I mean, wild animals do not look after their health, right? You do not find like antelope looking after their health. They are just naturally healthy. And so in a way, it's reasonable for people to not. A very healthy person probably doesn't even think about looking after their health. But in my experience, particularly once you get sort of midlife and beyond, I think you do need to look after your health. In other words, you do need to do things to stay healthy. And anyway, if you ask that question, people tell you stuff, and the answer goes in a surprisingly large number of different directions. But sometimes you get all the answers that you need just from asking that question. But if you don't get it, then you might want to ask people about for instance, their eating habits. Now, I've just done I've been an examiner 2 weeks ago for the Bristol Medical. And one of our small victories is we've got lifestyle medicine thoroughly embedded in the assessment system. So every time they have a set of OSCEs, there will be a lifestyle medicine type question. And in this one, It was about type 2 diabetes. But one of the things that slightly disappointed me was that amongst the many brilliant things the students did, their ability to take a focused dietary history needs work. Medical student colleagues, remember, when you guys do OSCEs, we are being examined in our ability to teach you. So if we see something isn't working, then we need to do something about it. So when you want to ask people about their nutrition, about their diet, like the worst thing, this is where closed questions truly don't work. Yeah, do you eat a healthy diet? Oh yeah, doc. Yeah, I always do. Yeah. Okay. So you have to the thing that we taught you in is the 24-hour dietary recall. And I'm a great believer in this because it is quick. What did you have for breakfast this morning? You just talk me through it. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. What about dinner last night? When your evening meal, what was that looking like? And you just go back to lunch of that previous day. And generally speaking, that will be typical of everything they eat. So we ask about nutrition, we ask about physical activity. We trend away from talking about exercise because that's something you do specifically to get fit, which isn't really a natural thing to do at all. But again, because of our lifestyles, many of us choose to do it. And so it goes on. You build up a kind of quite quickly a general impression, but because we're in a time-constrained environment, we can't ask them about everything. So generally, we focus in on something that's really, worthy of further debate, further discussion, particularly if it relates to the presenting complaint.
Wow. We haven't had a debrief since, I guess, a couple of years ago. So I definitely took the LIFE, the lifestyle consultation leaflet that I designed from our group, that when we were preparing and organising this new teaching method, and I actually took it onto the hospital wards when I was an F1, and I started to ask patients with it. And I actually used it in my second year GP practice as well, and I used the questions as really good results, and also definitely very helpful as well in mental health reviews as well. That was really, really helpful. So it's incredible to hear that this new. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just to give you a sort of final, because these are all preliminaries to activation, right? So you're getting a good sense of where the person's at, and then you've got you've got a lot of options. You can just give people information, if it's about a better diet, or like you happen to know about a particular walking group. And this is where you need a bunch of information that unfortunately you don't learn at medical school or school. It's it depends. You have to know your own location, your own locality. I think sometimes it's a bit harder for junior doctors and even consultants in hospitals, maybe not so in touch with the resources because you're quite hospital centered. And I'm sure that's something that could be improved. And this is one of the windows that's opened by social prescribing as well.
Absolutely. It's really, I would say it's inspirational and really positive to hear about the changes that you've brought into Bristol Medical School, and about how it's progressing there to make the consultations more, surrounded with self-care activation. We did speak we initially spoke, or you mentioned previously in our conversation, about how the medical model and treatments focused around pharmaceutical and surgical interventions. Um, a lot of the traditional medical teaching, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, did you was there a lot more of that, teaching that to medical students instead of what you're teaching now? And what have the barriers been to bringing in this type of teaching?
Well, I mean, that's a general question about innovation. I mean, one of the things you have to do is you have to turn up, right? So when they have meetings that they're discussing the curriculum, you have to be there. It's quite competitive because there's lots of people think that what they are interested in is the important thing that the students need to be taught. Second of all, teaching, this sounds a bit weird, is slightly out of fashion. What do I mean? You don't have so many lectures now in med school. And interesting, what we're discovering is that students are not attending lectures. There's a few reasons for that. One, the chiefest reason is that everything's recorded, so you don't need to turn up. In your time at Bristol, Ian, that was already the case. I think the pandemic put everybody online, and I don't think any of us have really gone back to the way we were before. I think that students are very strategic, so they don't want to waste time at a lecture. They feel they could get the key points at a later date, and so we've had attendance has been not as good as I wish I could say that the 270 patients in the current year 3 had all had a thorough training in lifestyle medicine, which had they attended, they probably would. And they've probably, some of them, listened back, and they'll need to because it's in the OSCEs. So a barrier, you asked me about barriers. I mean, I think possible, well, if I want to put it onto the sort of learning community, I think a possible barrier is that still students are most focused on learning that's going to appear in the written examinations. They have a penchant for learning that is crisp in terms of definite information. If you're learning a skill set like motivational interviewing, it's not a super crisp, definite thing to do, like how to examine cranial nerves, which has got a dance routine you have to learn. It's not so. It's at some level, our student colleagues have to want to understand and work in these ways, and like I think that they probably reflect society, and not everybody does. So it is a bit of that is a possible barrier. Another barrier is that when you want to create a cultural shift, it's one thing, for you, Ian, to be culturally shifting away in Nutritank.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far and learning a lot. For those of you who are new listeners, welcome. If you're finding this information valuable, I would love for you to consider joining our regular listener family. Just hit that follow button wherever you're listening and you'll never miss a new episode. By the way, one of our main goals is to educate as many healthcare professionals as possible about the power of nutrition and lifestyle medicine. So if you know someone who might benefit from this information, whether it's a colleague, friend, or family member working in the field, please consider sharing this episode with them. Now let's get back to the show and dive deeper.
But the institutions are continuing to work a bit like they always have, say. So the notion of self-care activation is not yet reflex for our senior colleagues, and therefore the students are not seeing those behaviors role modeled.
Yeah.
So and the impact of any one person like myself, say, is, I have to say, relatively small, because there's a lot of other factors coming in. But nonetheless, I think that we think we're innovators, but in fact, we're often just expressing existing or developing cultural trends. And lifestyle medicine seems to be bloody popular with younger doctors. I mean, they have these conferences, they have the Lifestyle Medicine Club of Great Britain, whatever it's called, and Nutritank and so on, and they are. I mean, my wife's a doctor. She's at a conference in London on, I think it's lifestyle medicine. They have 1,000 people are there, or where that integrative medicine, I think it's called, and that is a sign of. I mean, I think there's a thirst for this sort of stuff. It's just creating the right context. Uh, and I want to just, I said it before and I want to say it again, which is it is good fun. It's enjoyable practice. And you do, like if the patient comes in and they need antibiotics for, I don't know, a very bad tonsillitis or whatever, and if they work, you're pleased. If they don't work, well, I'll just try erythromycin instead. Um, you're not personally, you don't have much skin in the game, but if you've really worked with someone and you're wanting to help them shift a significant problem through lifestyle medicine approaches, then if it works out, it's it's really it's professionally very, very satisfying. Makes life just day much more enjoyable.
That's an amazing message to provide to our audience who are healthcare professionals out there. But I I want to just shift the last couple of questions to not just thinking about not just healthcare professionals listening, but also members of the public or um, nutritionists, dietitians who might be really wanting to see this kind of change in the UK within their communities, or um, so directly talking to them, what self-care tip um, would you like to give them, like an actionable self-care tip that they could start today?
Everyone is in a different place, and it's funny. Some people find some things. It's always interested to me. Like I've never really been tempted by alcoholism, and I see very nice people, wonderful people who get caught by that particular thing. You know, somebody else gets caught by something else. We all seem to have this sort of. Most people do have some sort of vulnerability, um, and I suppose my tip is to face that and to get in there and really just sort of when you have a like an urge to something that's not going to be good for you is just to see if you can find a little gap in that process just to feel what's really going on inside yourself. For me, like that sort of approach has helped me to avoid, because it seems to me that once, particularly with diet, say, like once you've deviated, you're kind of off the path for a while before you get back onto it. So the skill is to try and is developing the awareness to maybe not do that. But I got a feeling you wanted something a little more
No,
succinct
no, I think
for your
that's
tip.
fantastic. I think that's it's the audience can receive it how they want, and the next question about community is about community action. So how can our audience who within their work communities, or they want to see changes within society, what what strength do you feel they need to um, grow in themselves? What quality do we need to see more of in ourselves so that we can combat the rise of um, chronic disease, or improve societal health?
Well, it's just sort of dropped to mind, but I find that there's always, it's going to sound a bit cliched here, but it is there always hope. Now, I have, as a patient of the NHS, uh, I and as a practitioner in it, I see it as my job to always dispense hope, even in terminal care. I feel, particularly in end of life care, I always feel that there's hope, and um, it is a little. Yeah, I was listening. Because I was painting a door this morning. I listened to virtually the whole of the day program. For some reason, it particularly struck me what a terrible lot of stuff is going on in the world. We've got a major war not that very far away. people are dying today and that, and we've got like this situation with the heating up of the sea. I was in Donegal, and honestly, and the sea was properly warm. It was hot almost, and that's pretty weird in the west, on the Atlantic. Yeah. Anyway, I feel that first of all, yes, we have to accept that these things are happening, and it's not about denying them. But I think for all your listeners, I think that the the I mean, let me give you a little example. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was a and we were shocked. This was a big shock to us. We were in hospital, and the junior doctor, we said to the junior doctor, do you ever find that people just spontaneously recover from type 1 diabetes? A dumb question in a way. I'd never heard of that. But I feel at that moment, when we were just coming to terms with like a big thing in our family, and the guy said to me, he said, "Oh yeah, I remember once, there was this kid that came in with BM of 32 and like totally dehydrated, and we rehydrated them, and they started getting hypos on the insulin we were giving them, so we had to stop that. And then it seemed she just recovered, and we figured that some virus had attacked the pancreas, but it had anyway. I don't know whether he even made the story up, but it 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 gave us, like, we knew that that wasn't going to happen to our daughter, but for some reason it was very, very helpful just to have somebody who who believed that that might happen. And with patients, unfortunately, as a practitioner, you have to believe in the patient more than they believe in themselves at that particular moment about that particular issue. And so I feel that, like, just the inner work that we all have to do as human beings to sort of find a sort of appropriate place of positivity uh, is very, very potent. And you can bring that to your practitioner work, and also to the work in the community, including the kind of virtual online world. I mean, I remember, what's his name?
Yes.
Rupi? I said to Rupi, how do you manage all this social media? And he said, well, you see, the technique is just to be always positive. And I know that could sound a bit false in a way, but I don't think it was in his case. I think what it is that you're just trying, you're just relentlessly, endlessly, day after day, putting out like positive energy. And that is the job of the doctor, unfortunately. That is the job of the healer, which is to and then, of course, you do all the other wonderful things that in your life, like sailing in Donegal, whatever it happens to be for you, and they recharge your batteries, and then you can't obviously give out without also the whole ritual of fixing yourself.
And yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
That was some brilliant advice. And from experience and from the heart, it was totally what we were looking for. Just the audience, we were referring to Dr. Rupi Aujla from the Doctor's Kitchen, and also founder of Calorie Medicine UK. Yeah.
Yeah, he was there. I mean, that first year that we did that was pretty good, because we had Rufy coming from London like every week, and then we had what was his name? Jamie Oliver came for a
Yes,
day.
he did.
I think the problem with that was that ever since then, the students are wondering, like, when's Jamie Oliver going to show up?
It was a pretty special time, yeah, for sure. And it was important. No, it was great to get the message out there, and to talk to well, for you to talk to also Jamie Oliver's team, and about the work that was happening in Bristol.
And I always feel that what we do is very it's quite a small thing. Like, the culinary medicine is only a group of food fanatics that sign up for that, and so, but I just encourage everyone just to believe in that lots of little small things can be worth
Absolutely,
it.
absolutely. Um, we were just referring there that Culinary Medicine UK student-selected projects in the summer for a select number of students who sign up to it. So not for a whole year group as of yet.
Yes, I think they do something a bit more ambitious in terms of numbers at
Mm.
UCL,
The
don't
whole
they?
year.
They have a whole thing, but ours is pure students, but much more in depth. It's really it's quite an in-depth training, and I think the recruitment was good. It's actually happening right now, and this is a student choice project
Brilliant.
season.
It's good to hear. And one last question for our audience who want to know more about how they can, enact change, how they can bring innovation to their communities, be that in the workplace, be that in their educational place, if they're policymakers wanting to make a change in the topic that we've just spoken about, what resources could you signpost them to right now?
Where to begin? I mean, as a GP, I found like David Unwin has collected some really good stuff and created some good stuff around the type 2 diabetes story, so that every GP should know that, and I think increasingly they are aware. I mean, I am a member of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. I think that they are a really good resource. I think they're quite wise people, and they've got some good stuff. So I think it's all professionals. Yeah, that can be good. Um, I mean, the motivational interviewing literature is quite important, and I do believe that Stephen Rolnick and his sidekick have recently produced a new edition or a new book for motivational interviewing in healthcare, or it's very soon to come out. And they run courses, so I recommend that.
Thank you. And yeah, just to finish up, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on the podcast today. And I didn't get a chance to compliment your amazing shirt yet. For those listening and not watching, it's blue, naval blue, but with polka dots or lots of different colors. It's fantastic. So
I know that you care about these things,
I
Ian.
do very much.
It's been a great pleasure, and good luck with your podcast and with Nutritank, which I think has been a useful resource. Even after you've left, Ian, I have still had dealings with the Bristol Nutritank boss when I gave my lecture on about healthy eating, and just to try and find out what things are important to students in this field at the moment. Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
work.
So thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Professor Trevor Thompson. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, share it with your friends and family and drop us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Don't forget to follow the show on your favorite streaming platform and connect with us online to stay up to date with all the latest news and episodes. If you feel engaged with a particular aspect of today's show, then please comment on our social media posts for this episode. They'll be linked in the show notes. See you in the next episode.